We are in Japan. We're at the Suzuka circuit. Figure 8 layout. We've got beautiful trees, a beautiful country, and many fans attending. Very well known for its tight, slow hairpins, very fast corners in many sections, but also a very infamous section of very wavy corners. In this, we see Sargent and Perez continue their struggles. We see a very crazy crash at the start where a car goes flying in the air. And we also have team orders looming over the paddock and the grid throughout the race. Let's discuss the Japan Grand Prix. So before the race even starts, obviously we have qualifying where Sargent has a nasty crash in the wall, which has become his MO. And he just gets loose in the grass and ends up wrecking it. Stroll goes out in Q1, kind of continues his struggles this year, just not really having it, but had brutal qualifying efforts to pass several times out, and he continues that streak here. Oscar gets onto the front row, so we see Piastri on the front row for this race, and let's just see how the race shakes out. We see the McLarens just have a lot more pace than their common competitors of Ferrari and Mercedes. I've been hearing the past couple weeks Aston Martin saying, we're going to be really good in Japan, we're going to be really good in Japan. I haven't really seen that from them. We'll see since Perez didn't maybe qualify as well as he wanted, are the McLarens going to be able to hold off Perez? Because I don't really think Mercedes or Ferrari have a true shot at them this time around. Max looks dominant. I'm going to see, my main question is, are the Aston Martins and Mercedes going to be good? Is Ferrari going to be able to build off of their win last week? But let's get into the race and talk about how that squared away. So, on the start, craziness ensues. We have a car go flying, as I mentioned earlier. Everything kind of looks good for a second or so, but from what I gathered, Ocon got a little bit far to the left. It started fading to the left a little bit, and that caused Valtteri Bottas to have to move over because he kind of got squeezed a little bit, and that resulted in him getting into Alex Albon, and that caused Bottas to have a puncture, which ended up ruining his race, unfortunately. But we also see Perez, Hamilton touching tires, but the real issue is that the Alfa Romeo gets into Alex Albon, and some of that debris gets into a couple others, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But things get a little bit racy at the start. Before this yellow happens, we see the McLarens trying to challenge Max. I don't know if they would necessarily have gotten him, but that we did see him having to defend up and down a little bit there. And the Alpha Tauris get racy with one another early on as well, and really seeing Lawson trying to prove that he's worthy to be in F1. We already know he doesn't have that seat next year, but he's still trying to race for maybe a potential seat on the grid in the future. A safety car does come out on the track due to the debris on the track, as I mentioned, but by lap 5, Sargent gets into Bottas, and so Sargent continues his wreck fest and takes him off the track, and that was just brutal. I feel bad for Bottas. He was just trying to hang on from the beginning of the race, and then that just didn't help him at all. Lap 6, Russell passes Hamilton, and this relationship will not be completed whatsoever. This will be a trend we see throughout the race where Russell and Hamilton have many duels, and a lot of drama will come from that. But Hamilton's able to get him right back on this lap 6 after they get into the front stretch. And as I mentioned, Bottas ends up retiring from the race due to Sargent's crash, but also from debris from that original crash as well. Perez makes a terrible decision. This is like lap 15, I think. Going on the inside of Magnussen, gets into him, and really everybody just thinks this is just a massive blunder. And many people are saying Perez just struggles to focus, and I don't think they're wrong here. But let's get into the middle part of the race as things settle down a little bit, what ensues here. So I mentioned it already, lap 16, we see the Mercedes continue their battle and even racing off track a little bit as well, and taking the cars onto the curbing. Hamilton ends up winning this battle this time around, but I have a quote from Russell. He gets very salty. He's like, who do we want to fight here? Each other? or the others. And, he's referencing that teammates shouldn't be battling this hard with one another. But who else are they going to race at this point? They're not catching anybody. But around lap 19, we see people starting to pit. This is kind of the first pit sequence. A lot of people were going for this more so 2 to 3 stop race, especially with the yellows kind of coming into play. Others tried to go for a 1 stop because they got hosed early on. But in this lap 19-ish section, we see many people die for the pits. And due to the pit sequencing here in Japan, we see a lot of cars maybe getting behind a few spots and having to gain those spots back up. And that was really a lot more of where the overtaking came, was during these pit sequencings. But we really see people trying to regain positions, trying to find opportunities to overtake, maybe undercut, overcut. And so lap 19 and 20, I did realize that Sainz had maybe not the best pit sequence, and that caused him to lose a position to Lewis. And so Sainz starts to make a climb and overtakes Alonso and Ocon. He lost the positions after he came to the pits, trying to catch up here. Hamilton's able to get Alonso quite easily. Mercedes is better than Aston Martin this time around. By lap 27, we see a team order asking Norris and Piastri to swap places. And so they want to give Norris a shot at the person in front of them. And there was no drama really there. But Alonso gets Tsunoda on lap 30. We see more people stop as they're making their second pit stops around lap 35. And so really in these 2 pit sequencings, again, we're really going to see most of this overtaking, just people really trying to get back to where they were before the pit sequencing. It's not like people are outpacing one another at this point. But Norris and Piastri both regained their positions that were provisionally held by Russell. He was up there in the top 3 during this pit sequencing, but they gain it back. They had the pace this weekend for sure. Lap 45, Leclerc gets Russell. I mentioned earlier, before really going into the race, I was just trying to see, really, is Ferrari going to be able to catch Mercedes? What's going to happen there? And he ends up getting Russell there. But with a few laps left to go, I was really wondering if Sainz was going to be able to get into the mix here and get past the Mercedes as well. We saw Leclerc do it. Will Sainz be able to do it as well? And by lap 49, Carlos really starts to bring pressure onto the Mercedes Cats. And this is where the team orders come in. At this point, Russell is ahead of Lewis Hamilton, and they decide that they want to let Lewis get ahead of Russell to give them a better shot at defending Sainz. And almost right after this, Sainz is able to get or collect Russell, and he doesn't end up getting Lewis, but I could see that Russell's pretty salty here. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But by lap 50, as I mentioned, Sainz gets that spot from Russell. Doesn't mean too much in the grand scheme of things. They're fighting for a point or two. But let's get into the next section where I talk about team orders. And so this is like a kind of a meme throughout Formula One. Before I even knew anything about Formula One, I knew the controversy with team orders and how in the past there have been team orders to purposely wreck people or wreck out to cause yellows, and that caused a lot of controversy. 2004 through 2010, they tried to ban it. It still happened, whatever. And so it's not banned or anything, but it's just kind of whenever they have a team order, it's kind of like, oh, here we go. What's going to happen here? And so really the first team order that I did mention was that Norris and Piastri had a team order. Piastri let Norris get by. I think that ended up helping him going down the road here, even though Max was just way, way far ahead. So McLaren had that first team order, and then coming from then, we did see a team order with Mercedes. And this is kind of where the drama ensued. As we saw last week, George Russell did not have a great finish to his race, ended up wrecking out in that last lap. And so you could see that he really had maybe some tension, maybe not. He's still frustrated, I think, from last weekend. And so he's bringing that into this race, trying to get the best finish he can. And then his teammates racing him the whole race pretty hard, which I think is fine in this essence. But he's just kind of being a baby about that. And then he's finally ahead of Hamilton. And then his team says, let Hamilton by. And he's like, really, bro? And so you could see that he maybe wasn't happy about that. And, maybe rightfully so. But there was some drama there. And I think him and Hamilton are going to have some talks after the race about their raciness during the race. But then we see a team order as well with Gasly and Ocon, as they were called to switch places later on in the race. And we did notice that Ocon had that damage, had a really tough, scrappy race. And we'll talk about him maybe a little bit later when we get to the results. But him and Gasly were ordered to switch places as well. And Gasly was very upset in the post-driver interview and said that he needed to talk to the team about that because he was frustrated about that switch needed to happen. But let's talk about kind of what ended up squaring away and what ended up happening in the results of the race. So let's get into the results of the race. And so with just 6 races left on the schedule, Red Bull already takes the Constructors' title, which is just insane. So props to Max. He wins by 19.4 seconds ahead of the field. It's his 13th win of the year. Then we really see the McLarens. They really had no true contention for the podium pretty much all day. But coming from there, we see Piastri getting his first podium in Formula One. I think he's got a bright career ahead of him. And so I'm looking forward to seeing him compete moving forward. We see kind of Leclerc sandwiched in between Piastri and Hamilton here. I think he had a pretty good drive, but he even admitted post-race he just didn't have the pace to even catch the McLarens. We see Lewis Hamilton and Sainz and then Russell, so kind of like a Ferrari, Mercedes kind of mixed up here. And as I mentioned, there was some drama there, right? Russell really fell off, I feel like, towards the end, and even after he gave up the position to Hamilton, and really they were finding each other all day, and that was just what today meant for Mercedes, just racing each other, it felt like. But Ferrari didn't have much pace, and from there we see Fernando Alonso, Esteban Ocon. As I mentioned, Ocon had that debris that hit his car early in the race, and he was able to have a really mature drive and get some points. And so props to him on that. Pierre Gasly, as I mentioned, was frustrated, but still got points. Alpine getting double points when they didn't really qualify all that well. And so I think they had a pretty good drive, all things considered, especially with the craziness in the beginning of the race. Liam Lawson, getting 11th, just missing out on points, but I think he's proving that he deserves to be here in Formula One. And I don't know if that's going to mean him really having that Williams seat. I don't know if that's really a possibility for him. And we already know that he's not going to be driving with AlphaTauri, but maybe down the line, he's able to secure a seat for 2025. Yuki Tsunoda getting 12th, and we see Zhou Guanyu 13th, Hülkenberg 14th, Magnussen 15th, and he really had some issues with getting into some people throughout the race, unfortunately. But we see Alex Albon, who DNFs, Sargent DNFs, Stroll DNFs, Perez DNFs, Bottas DNFs, and a couple of them really didn't have much of an option because they got wrecked out. But nonetheless, next week we'll see that Red Bull is going to have a chance to Max is going to have the chance to have his first opportunity to clinch the title. They already won the Constructors' title as a team, but Max will have the first opportunity to clinch the title individually. And so what are my thoughts? Really, when I was watching IndyCar this season, Alex Palou clinched the title with a race left to go, and even that was kind of deflating for me as a fan, because I'm like, well, what does this even really mean? None of these races mean much because we already have a title winner, right? And that was just one race that happened. But in this case, in Formula One, we have six races left to go, and we already know who the team winners are going to be. And really, it's inevitable that he's going to win the title this year with probably 5 races left to go. And I feel like that's a little bit deflating, and ideally that doesn't happen. But, that's just what this year has been. Red Bull's been dominant, and, they deserved it. But really now we're just looking at other teams fighting for the championship. Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes fighting for that Constructors' Championship. Maybe some new winners trying to find their way here towards the end of the year. We really saw that the Lawson thing. I feel like he maybe deserves the spot more than Ricciardo. And I know Ricciardo has a history of being a very good driver, but they're both in the same car, and Lawson's had better results, and he's younger. And so he might be able to give you maybe a future there with AlphaTauri, because who knows how long Yuki's going to be around there. But race overall, I feel like the pit sequencing allowed for some overtaking, but really it was just kind of fake overtaking in a way because they were just getting the spots back they lost anyway. And the real racing we saw and the real entertainment was between teammates, and that was with Mercedes, and then maybe seeing the Ferraris trying to catch the Mercedes and the McLarens, I guess, trying to see who was going to best one another because they weren't going to catch Max all day. It was an average race, but it was nice to see the McLarens secure 2 podium positions, and I think that's a good start for those the young duo they have going on there. But what did you guys think of the race? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you guys enjoy motorsports content, go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel, as I will be posting motorsports content from NASCAR, Formula One, and Indycar, and many other series throughout the next several months. And so thank you for watching again, and I hope you guys have an awesome week. I'll see you guys later. Peace.